Sophie Bennett was 26 years old when her entire world shifted on its axis without warning. It was a Tuesday morning in October, the kind of crisp autumn day in Portland when the leaves were just starting to turn and the coffee shops smelled like cinnamon and possibility. Sophie had taken the morning off work to attend what her father had cryptically called an important family meeting. She'd assumed it was about Thanksgiving plans or maybe her grandmother's estate. Grandma Ruth had passed away 6 months earlier, and there were still details to sort through. Instead, she found herself sitting in a downtown law office, watching her parents, Catherine and Michael Bennett, married for 28 years, the most boringly stable couple she'd ever known, sign divorce papers with the emotional detachment of people canceling a gym membership. Mom? Sophie's voice came out smaller than she intended. Dad? What's happening? Her mother's hand shook slightly as she signed her name on the final document. Her father sat ramrod straight, his accountant's precision evident in the way he aligned each paper before adding his signature. Neither of them looked at Sophie. Neither of them looked at each other. The attorney, a woman named Mrs. Harrison with silver hair and kind eyes that couldn't hide her own confusion, collected the documents with professional efficiency. That concludes the proceedings, she said gently. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, you're officially divorced as of today's date. 28 years of marriage, dissolved in less time than it took Sophie to drink her morning latte. Her father stood first, buttoning his suit jacket with the same methodical movements he used for everything. He was an accountant, after all, Michael Bennett, CPA, specializing in small business finances. A man whose idea of excitement was a particularly interesting tax code revision. Thank you, Mrs. Harrison, he said formally. Then, to Sophie's mother, Catherine. Just her name, nothing else, no explanation, no emotion, just an acknowledgement that she existed. Her mother nodded once, gathering her purse with hands that trembled slightly. Michael. Then they both turned to Sophie, and for a brief moment, she saw something flash across her mother's face, fear? Regret? Desperation, before it was replaced with a carefully neutral expression. Sophie, honey, her mother said, her voice tight with something Sophie couldn't identify. I'll call you later, okay? There's a lot we need to discuss. A lot to discuss? Sophie stood up, her voice rising. You just got divorced without any warning, without any explanation, and you'll call me later. What the hell is happening? Her father moved toward the door with practiced efficiency, like this was just another business meeting concluded. Your mother will explain everything. I have to go. Dad, wait. But he was already gone, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that made Sophie's chest tighten. She turned to her mother, searching that familiar face for answers. Catherine Bennett had always been the warm one, the parent who remembered birthdays and baked cookies and asked about Sophie's day. The woman standing before her now looked like a stranger wearing her mother's clothes. Mom, please, what's going on? You guys seemed fine last month at dinner. You were planning that trip to the coast. You were talking about remodeling the kitchen. And now you're divorced? I know this is confusing, her mother said quietly, avoiding eye contact. And I promise I'll explain. But not here, not now. She glanced at Mrs. Harrison, who was tactfully pretending to organize papers. It's complicated. Complicated? Mom, you just ended a 28-year marriage in a lawyer's office on a Tuesday morning. I think I deserve more than, it's complicated. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back with visible effort. Tomorrow. Meet me at Brewster's Cafe at 9. I'll explain everything then. Brewster's Cafe. Their place. Where they'd planned birthday parties when Sophie was little, where they'd filled out college applications together, where they'd gossiped over coffee about everything from work drama to her mother's book club scandals. Fine, Sophie said, grabbing her coat. But tomorrow, Mom, I want the truth. All of it. Her mother nodded, a strange sad smile on her face. Tomorrow, I promise. Sophie left the law office and walked to her car in a daze. The Portland street was full of normal people doing normal things, buying coffee, walking dogs, checking their phones, living their predictable lives. None of them had just watched their parents dissolve a nearly 3-decade marriage with zero explanation. She sat in her Honda for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her parents had always been stable. Boring, even. The kind of couple who watched Wheel of Fortune together every night and took the same vacation to the Oregon coast every summer. They didn't get sudden, inexplicable divorces. Sophie's phone buzzed. A text from her best friend Lauren. How did the family meeting go? Everything okay? She stared at the message, trying to figure out how to respond. My parents just got divorced and I have no idea why, seemed both dramatic and entirely insufficient to capture the surreal wrongness of the past hour. She settled for, weird. Call you later. That night, Sophie lay in her apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every recent interaction with her parents, looking for signs she'd missed. Her father had been normal. Maybe slightly more distracted than usual, taking more calls in the garage, spending more time at the office. But he was an accountant. October meant tax extension deadlines and year-end planning. Long hours came with the territory. Her mother had seemed fine too. Maybe a little more anxious lately, checking her phone more often, startling easily when doors opened unexpectedly. But Sophie had attributed that to stress about Grandma Ruth's estate and the general anxiety that seemed to affect everyone in 2023. Nothing had suggested divorce was imminent. Nothing had prepared her for watching her parents sign papers like strangers conducting a business transaction. Tomorrow, her mother had promised. Tomorrow at Brewster's, she'd explain everything. Sophie just hoped she was ready for whatever everything turned out to be. Sophie arrived at Brewster's cafe 15 minutes early, claiming their usual corner table, the one with the wobbly leg they'd learned to avoid, positioned next to the window for optimal people watching. She ordered her vanilla latte and settled into wait, mentally preparing herself for whatever explanation her mother was about to provide. Maybe it was an affair. Maybe years of suburban monotony had finally driven one of them to seek excitement elsewhere. Maybe it was financial problems, though her father was an accountant, so that seemed unlikely. Maybe it was just the slow erosion of love over time, the kind of quiet ending that happens when people realize they've become roommates instead of partners. At exactly 9 a.m., her mother walked through the door. That should have been Sophie's first warning sign. Catherine Bennett had never been punctual in her life. She ran at least 15 minutes late to everything, apologizing profusely while digging through her purse for whatever she'd forgotten. But today, she moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the cafe with an intensity Sophie had never seen before. She looked both ways before entering, checked over her shoulder twice, and clutched her purse like it contained state secrets. Mom, Sophie started as Catherine slid into the seat across from her without ordering coffee, another warning sign. What's going? We don't have much time, her mother interrupted, her voice low and urgent. She pulled an envelope from her purse with shaking hands. The envelope was old, yellowed around the edges like it had been stored somewhere dark for years. The way Catherine handled it, carefully, deliberately, made Sophie's stomach twist with anxiety. Listen to me very carefully, her mother whispered, leaning across their wobbly table. Don't open this here, go straight home and pack a bag. You have 24 hours. Sophie stared at her mother like she'd started speaking Mandarin. What are you talking about? 24 hours for what? Catherine pressed the envelope into Sophie's hands. It was thick, stuffed with something substantial. Her eyes kept darting around the cafe, watching other customers like any one of them might suddenly become a threat. I can't explain everything now. It's not safe. But Sophie, your father. She paused, swallowing hard. Your father isn't who you think he is. None of this is what you think it is. The words made no sense. Her father was Michael Bennett, accountant from Ohio who collected vintage vinyl records and fell asleep watching true crime documentaries every Sunday night. Mom, you're scaring me. What do you mean Dad isn't who I think he is? Catherine grabbed Sophie's wrist across the table, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who usually struggled to open pickle jars. Pack light, only essentials, cash only for everything from now on. And Sophie, her voice dropped to barely a whisper, trust no one else. Not even family. The envelope felt heavy in Sophie's hands, weighted with secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to discover. I love you, sweetheart, her mother said, standing abruptly without having touched a drop of coffee. More than you'll ever know. But you need to go now. Please. Mom, wait. But Catherine was already moving toward the exit, walking quickly but not quite running, checking over her shoulder once before disappearing onto the Portland street. Sophie sat there for several minutes, holding the envelope, while the cafe continued its normal Tuesday morning routine around her. People ordering their usual drinks, checking emails, having perfectly ordinary conversations about perfectly ordinary lives. Meanwhile, she was apparently living in some alternate reality where mothers handed their daughters mysterious envelopes and told them to disappear within 24 hours. The smart thing would have been to open it right there in the cafe. But something about the genuine fear in her mother's eyes, the way she'd looked around like they were being watched, made Sophie think maybe she was right about not being safe. So she paid for her untouched latte and headed home, her hands shaking almost as much as her mother's had been. carrying an envelope that was about to change everything she thought she knew about her life. Sophie made it exactly to her apartment bedroom before ripping open the envelope. So much for following her mother's careful instructions about waiting until she got home safely. But honestly, would anyone have been able to resist? The contents spilled across her gray comforter like pieces of someone else's life. First thing she saw was a passport, deep blue with United States of America, printed in gold letters. She flipped it open and nearly dropped it on the floor. Her photo stared back at her, but the name read, Isabella Martinez, born in Miami, Florida. According to this document, she was apparently a 26-year-old Florida native who'd been issued this passport 3 years ago. 3 years ago, her mother had been planning whatever this was for 3 entire years. Next came a credit card, also in Isabella's name, and what looked like several $1,000s in cash, crisp, sequential bills like they'd been sitting in a bank vault waiting for exactly this moment. There was a key attached to a plastic tag with an address, 1847 Gulf Boulevard, Unit 312, Tampa, Florida. And a handwritten note that simply said, emergency apartment. Everything you need is there. But it was the letter at the bottom that made Sophie's blood run cold. Her mother's familiar handwriting, but shakier than usual, like she'd written it under stress or in a hurry. My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, it means the life we built for you is no longer safe. Your father is not the man you know. He's not even the man I thought I married 28 years ago. The truth is dangerous, and I've spent your entire life protecting you from it. Sophie had to stop reading for a moment. That feeling when the ground shifts under your feet and suddenly everything you thought was solid turns out to be quicksand? That was happening in real time. The letter continued. Pack only what you absolutely need. Use the identity I've created for you. Go to the Florida address immediately. Do not contact anyone from your old life, not friends, not coworkers, not family members. I will find you when it's safe. But until then, Sophie Bennett no longer exists. You are Isabella Martinez now. Isabella Martinez. Even thinking the name felt like wearing someone else's clothes. I know this is confusing and terrifying. I know you have a million questions, and I wish I could answer them all right now. But sweetheart, some answers are more dangerous than ignorance. Trust me, trust the plan I've made for us. And trust that everything I've done has been to keep you alive. Keep her alive. What kind of suburban accountant father required this level of escape planning? Sophie looked around her bedroom, taking in all the pieces of her life. Photos from college graduation on her dresser. Her marketing diploma hanging on the wall. The snow globe from their family trip to Mount Hood last winter, when their biggest concern was whether her father would remember to pack his reading glasses. According to this letter, she was supposed to abandon all of it. Become someone else entirely. Start over with nothing but whatever fit in a suitcase. The really unsettling part was how thorough her mother's planning had been. The passport was dated 3 years ago, which meant Catherine had been building Isabella Martinez's identity long before whatever crisis had finally triggered this emergency plan. What kind of marriage requires that level of contingency planning? What kind of husband makes his wife secretly prepare escape routes for their daughter? Sophie started throwing clothes into a suitcase, her hands moving automatically while her brain tried to process the impossibility of the situation. Jeans, sweaters, underwear, the basics. It felt surreal, like packing for a vacation she might never return from. Should she take her photo albums? Her grandmother's necklace? How do you pack an entire life into a single bag? That's when she became aware of an engine running outside. Not unusual for her Portland neighborhood, except this engine had been running for the past 10 minutes without moving. Sophie peeked through her bedroom curtains and felt her stomach drop. A dark sedan was parked across the street. Windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. Engine running like whoever was inside was ready to leave quickly if necessary. The car hadn't been there when she got home from the cafe 30 minutes ago. It was positioned perfectly to watch her apartment entrance, with a clear view of anyone coming or going. Suddenly, her mother's paranoid behavior at the coffee shop was making a lot more sense. Sophie's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. They found you. Leave now. Back door. Great. Apparently she now had mysterious allies sending warnings about mysterious threats. This was officially the strangest day of her life. And considering her parents had just gotten divorced without explanation and handed her a fake identity, that was really saying something. Sophie grabbed her suitcase, the cash, the credit card, and the passport. Everything else, 26 years of Sophie Bennett's life, would have to stay behind. As she headed for her apartment's back exit, she took one last look around the place where she'd lived for 3 years. All those memories, all those ordinary moments that had seemed so normal just hours ago, now felt like props in some elaborate performance she hadn't known she was part of. Time to find out what the real story was. Turns out sneaking out of your apartment building with a suitcase and a fake identity is exactly as weird as it sounds. Sophie went out the back exit, through the alley that smelled like restaurant garbage and broken dreams, the same route she'd used exactly once when she was running late for work and couldn't find her car keys. The dark sedan was still parked out front when she carefully made her way around the block to the visitor parking lot where she'd left her Subaru. She kept her head down, trying to look like any normal person running Tuesday errands. Definitely not someone fleeing from mysterious watchers with a suitcase full of emergency supplies and a fake passport. Her phone buzzed again as she started the car. Airport. Southwest. Tampa flight leaves at 2:40. Ticket waiting at counter under Martinez name. Southwest Airlines. Economy class to Tampa. Her mysterious support network had thought of everything. Sophie's hands shook on the steering wheel as she pulled out of the parking lot, checking her rearview mirror constantly. Was that silver Toyota following her? What about the blue pickup 2 cars back? Paranoia was exhausting. No wonder her mother had looked so tired lately. The Portland International Airport was busy for a Tuesday afternoon, business travelers, families heading to warmer climates, completely normal people living completely normal lives. Sophie envied every single one of them. She found a drugstore in the terminal and bought the first black hair dye she could find, along with scissors and oversized sunglasses. If she was going to become Isabella Martinez, she might as well look the part. The airport bathroom became her transformation chamber. 30 minutes later, blonde Sophie was gone. The mirror reflected a stranger with dark hair and sunglasses covering half her face. Hello, Isabella. Nice to meet you, I guess. You know what they don't tell you about dramatically changing your appearance in a public restroom? It's surprisingly easy when you're running on pure terror and adrenaline. Though she did not recommend cheap drugstore dye. Her hair looked like she'd dunked it in chocolate syrup, but at least it was different. The Southwest counter had her ticket ready, just as promised. The agent didn't even blink at the name Isabella Martinez, just scanned her passport and wished her a pleasant flight. Sophie, no, Isabella now, found her gate and collapsed into an uncomfortable airport chair, trying to catch her breath. Her phone buzzed. Her real phone, the Sophie Bennett phone, not whatever untraceable burner she was probably supposed to be using. A text from Lauren. Hey, want to grab dinner Thursday? New Thai place downtown. Thursday. 2 days away. In Sophie's old life, she would have immediately said yes, made plans, looked forward to complaining about work over pad thai and spring rolls. In Isabella's new life, Sophie Bennett couldn't exist anymore. She typed out a response, then deleted it. Then tried again. Deleted again. Finally, she turned the phone completely off and shoved it to the bottom of her suitcase. Isabella Martinez didn't have friends in Portland. Isabella Martinez didn't have a marketing job or a favorite Thai restaurant or a best friend who sent dinner invitations. Isabella Martinez had nothing but a suitcase, a fake identity, and a mother's promise that this was all to keep her alive. The flight to Tampa felt endless. Every person who walked down the aisle could have been coming for her. The businessman in 14C checking his phone, obviously reporting her location. The flight attendant who smiled at her, definitely suspicious. That crying baby in row 9, probably a distraction while someone planted a tracking device in her carry-on. Paranoia was apparently her new constant companion. Sophie, Isabella, kept pulling out the key to the Florida apartment, running her thumb over the plastic tag. 1847 Gulf Boulevard, Unit 312, Tampa, Florida. According to her mother's note, everything she needed would be there. But what did that mean exactly? Food? Clothes? More fake identities? A detailed explanation of why her entire life had apparently been built on lies? The woman next to her was reading a thriller novel with a gun on the cover, completely absorbed in whether the heroine would survive the conspiracy she'd stumbled into. Isabella envied her fictional problems. Her biggest worry was literary. Meanwhile, Isabella was wondering if her accountant father was secretly a criminal. When they landed in Tampa, she followed signs to the rental car counter, her new credit card in Isabella's name ready. It worked perfectly, both reassuring and terrifying. How long had her mother been planning this identity? How much money had she managed to stash away under a fake name? The drive to Tampa Beach should have been relaxing, palm trees, sunshine, the kind of postcard-perfect Florida scenery that usually makes people feel like they're on vacation. Instead, Isabella spent the entire time checking her rearview mirror, convinced every car was following her. When she finally found 1847 Gulf Boulevard, she sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, staring up at the building. It was a nice mid-rise apartment complex, the kind of place that would blend in perfectly anywhere in Florida. Smart choice for someone trying to disappear. Unit 312 was on the third floor, corner unit with windows facing the Gulf. She stood outside the door for a full minute before using the key, half expecting alarms to go off or security guards to appear. Instead, the lock turned smoothly, and the door opened to reveal the most surreal sight of her already impossible day. The apartment was completely furnished. Not just furnished, but decorated like a high-end hotel suite. Leather couch, glass coffee table, beach-themed art on the walls, everything coordinated in calming blues and whites. But here's what really got her. Everything was chosen as if her mother knew her taste perfectly. The throw pillows matched the exact shade she'd painted her college dorm room. The books on the shelf were authors she actually read. Even the coffee in the kitchen was her preferred brand. Catherine had been planning this for years, building an entire alternate life for her daughter down to the smallest details. The thought should have been comforting, knowing how much care she'd put into protecting her. Instead, it was absolutely terrifying. What kind of danger requires this level of preparation? Isabella spent her first night in the Tampa apartment eating takeout Chinese food and trying to convince herself this was all some elaborate misunderstanding. Maybe her father was having a midlife crisis. Maybe her mother was having a nervous breakdown. Maybe she'd wake up tomorrow and discover this was all some stress-induced nightmare brought on by too much true crime television and not enough sleep. But when she woke up Wednesday morning, she was still Isabella Martinez, still hiding in a secret apartment in Florida, still waiting for someone to explain why her suburban life had imploded overnight. The apartment had everything she could possibly need. The kitchen was stocked with non-perishables. The bathroom had toiletries in all her preferred brands. There were even clothes in the closet that were exactly her size, down to her favorite style of jeans and the soft cotton t-shirts she liked to sleep in. Her mother had thought of everything, right down to the type of shampoo she used. Which was somehow more unsettling than comforting. This level of detailed preparation suggested Catherine had been expecting this day for a very long time. Isabella found another note on the kitchen counter, tucked under a coffee mug that was exactly the style she would have chosen. You should be safe here for now. I've paid rent through the end of the year. There's more money in the bedroom safe, combination is your birthday. Wait for me to contact you. Do not reach out to anyone from your old life. Love, Mom. The safe was hidden behind a beach painting in the bedroom. When she opened it with her birthday combination, the 7th of November 97, she nearly fainted. There was enough cash inside to live comfortably for months. We're talking, grocery shopping every day and eating out constantly, money. Where had her mother gotten all this? Her father's accounting practice must have been way more profitable than she'd realized. Or there was something else going on entirely. And honestly, given the week she was having, she was leaning toward something else entirely. Isabella spent Wednesday exploring her temporary new home. The view from the living room showed the Gulf and the beach beyond, positioned strategically so she could see anyone approaching the building. The apartment had 2 exits, the front door and sliding glass doors to a small balcony with access to an exterior staircase. Her mother hadn't just planned for her safety, she'd planned for escape routes too. By Thursday morning, Isabella was going stir-crazy. You'd think being handed a luxury beachfront hideout would be relaxing. But when you can't leave, can't call anyone, can't even order pizza delivery because you're supposed to be invisible, paradise gets claustrophobic fast. Plus, the silence was driving her insane. No work emails, no texts from friends asking if she wanted to grab lunch, no mindless scrolling through social media. Just her, 4 walls, and way too much time to think about how her entire existence had apparently been an elaborate lie. She'd reorganized the kitchen cabinets twice, read 2 books, and watched more daytime television than any human should endure. If this was what witness protection felt like, no wonder people went crazy. That's when she heard voices in the hallway outside her door, 2 people talking quietly, their words muffled but their tone professional. Unit 312, one voice said clearly. You sure this is the right address? Isabella's blood turned to ice. These weren't maintenance workers or neighbors having a casual conversation. They were looking for her specific apartment. They were looking for her. She grabbed her phone, ready to call 911, then remembered her mother's warning about trusting no one. What if these people had connections to local police? What if calling for help would just tell the wrong people exactly where she was? The voices moved away from her door, heading toward the elevator. Probably going to check with building management or review tenant information. Professional, methodical, like they were used to tracking people down. Isabella quickly threw her essentials back into the suitcase. If they'd found her here, her location was compromised. Time to go. Even though she had absolutely no idea where to go next. The exterior staircase from her balcony became her best friend. She climbed down 3 flights, praying her suitcase wouldn't make noise banging against the metal railings. The parking lot was mostly empty in the late morning. Her rental car was exactly where she'd left it. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Marina parking lot. Blue Honda. Keys under driver's seat. Go now. Seriously, how many mysterious helpers did she have? Was this some elaborate network where strangers were stationed all over Florida just waiting to help her escape? But what choice did she have? The voices she'd heard were probably inside the building now, maybe talking to the front desk, definitely trying to track down exactly which unit belonged to Isabella Martinez. She made a dash for the marina about 2 blocks away, where sure enough, a blue Honda Civic sat in the parking lot with keys tucked exactly where promised. The car started immediately because apparently whoever was helping her had thought of everything. As she drove away from the compromised apartment, her phone buzzed again with directions to an address she didn't recognize. But at this point, following mysterious text messages seemed safer than trying to figure out her next move alone. At least someone in this insane situation seemed to know what they were doing. Because Isabella Martinez definitely didn't. The address led her to a small marina about 30 minutes south of Tampa Beach. She parked behind a seafood restaurant called Captain's Catch, exactly as the text instructed, next to a dumpster that smelled like old fish and shrimp shells. Not exactly the glamorous spy meeting location she'd been imagining. Isabella sat in the borrowed Honda for 20 minutes, watching boats bob in the marina and wondering if her life would ever make sense again. Families were having lunch on the restaurant's deck. Kids pointing excitedly at pelicans hoping for scraps. Couples sharing crab legs and probably normal conversations about normal things. Meanwhile, she was hiding behind a dumpster, waiting for mysterious instructions about threats she didn't understand. That's when she saw a familiar figure walking around the corner of the building. Not another mysterious stranger, but someone she actually recognized. Her mother, looking exhausted and nervous, but definitely her mother. "Sophie," Catherine said, rushing to the car with obvious relief. "Thank God you got out safely." "Mom, what the hell is happening?" Isabella, Sophie, whatever her name was, demanded, getting out of the Honda. "I've been hiding in Florida for 3 days. Strange people are tracking me down. I'm apparently driving someone else's car now. I think I deserve some actual answers." Her mother looked around the parking lot nervously before responding. "You're right, you deserve to know everything. But not here. Follow me." She led Sophie onto one of the docks, where a small motorboat was tied up, waiting for them. "Get in. We need to go somewhere we can talk without being overheard." "Mom, I am not getting on a boat with you until you start explaining things. This is getting absolutely insane." Catherine's face crumpled slightly. "Sophie, your father is not an accountant." The words hit like a slap. "What do you mean he's not an accountant? I've seen his office downtown. I've met Jerry from his firm and that receptionist who always asks about my dating life. I've listened to him complain about tax season for my entire existence." "That's all a cover story," her mother said quietly. "Your father works for very dangerous people. And right now, those people think he might be cooperating with federal authorities. They're looking for leverage to use against him. Leverage like me. Leverage like you." They got in the boat, and Catherine started the engine with practiced ease, heading toward a small island about a mile offshore. "Since when do you know how to drive a boat?" Sophie shouted over the engine noise. "Since I've been planning for this possibility for 3 years. Her mother shouted back. 3 years of planning. 3 years of building fake identities and stashing money and learning to operate boats. While Sophie had been blissfully unaware, worrying about whether she should switch to a high-deductible health insurance plan and if her marketing presentation was good enough for the quarterly review. When they reached the island, barely more than a patch of sand with some palm trees and a picnic table, Catherine tied up the boat and led Sophie to the table. "Your father's real name is Michael Caruso," she began, her words tumbling out like she'd been holding them back for years. "His family has been involved with organized crime for 3 generations. When I met him in college, he was trying to get out, trying to build a legitimate life away from all of that. Caruso. Our entire name is fake. We changed everything when we got married. Started fresh, moved across the country, created completely new identities. Or so we thought. But you don't just leave that world behind, Sophie. There are always connections, always obligations, always people who remember where you came from." Sophie thought about all those phone calls her father took in the garage. The way he'd changed subjects when she asked about work. Those sudden, business trips, that seemed to happen at odd times. So he's been lying to me my entire life. He's been protecting you your entire life. We both have. The less you knew, the safer you were. Until now. Until now. Catherine explained that something had gone wrong recently. Someone in Michael's family suspected he might be cooperating with federal authorities, and they'd started watching all of them. That's why I had to get you out, her mother said. The divorce wasn't real, it was legal protection. Creating distance between you and your father on paper, making it harder for anyone to justify targeting you. Sophie looked out at the water, watching boats in the distance living their normal lives. So what happens now? Do I just stay hidden forever? Your father is working on a solution. But until then, you need to stay invisible. And you need to be prepared for the possibility that Sophie Bennett can never come back. The weight of that statement settled over her like a blanket made of lead. Everything she'd ever been, everyone she'd ever known, might have to stay buried forever. 2 years after becoming Isabella Martinez, Sophie stood in her Austin backyard, watching her rescue dog chase butterflies through the garden she'd planted. Her phone rang, the secure line her mother had given her. Sophie? Catherine's voice was warm but cautious. Isabella, Sophie corrected gently. I'm Isabella now. How are you, sweetheart? Sophie looked around at the life she'd built. The house she'd chosen. The job at the refugee center where she helped people start over, just like she had. The master's degree in social work she'd earned. The partner who loved her without needing to know every detail of her past. I'm good, Mom. Really good. Your father and I are settled now. Different names, different city. We're safe. And we're proud of you. After they hung up, Sophie sat on her porch, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From Sophie Bennett, living someone else's carefully constructed life, to Isabella Martinez, choosing every aspect of her existence. She'd learned something important. Identity isn't about the name on your passport or the stories people tell about your childhood. It's about the choices you make when nobody's watching. The life you build when you're finally free to become whoever you want to be. Sophie Bennett had been someone else's creation, built around limitations and protections she'd never understood. Isabella Martinez was her own creation, built from courage and second chances and the understanding that sometimes the best way to honor your past is to build a completely different future. Some people might say she'd lost her identity when her parents' past caught up with them. She preferred to think she'd finally found it. The truth is, we're all constantly becoming new versions of ourselves anyway. Every choice, every experience, every relationship changes us in small ways. Sophie had just gotten the chance to do it all at once, to consciously decide who she wanted to be and start fresh. And for the first time in her life, she felt completely, authentically herself. Not Sophie Bennett. Not even really Isabella Martinez, but someone new entirely, someone who understood that love sometimes means letting go, that safety sometimes requires courage, and that the best way to honor your past is to build a future worth having. Outside, Austin was settling into another